Let's just finish the last sentence over here in the parak, just to finish it off. It says, "V'yotzu Yisrael miMitzrayim eleim kol tuv mimin brachos," and the Jews came out of Mitzrayim filled with all different types of good brachas, all the different types of good things, blessings. B'zochra davar shenamar leAvram, to as a kiyum, as a fulfillment of what it was said to Avraham Avinu by the Bris Ben Absarim, that Hashem said to him, "V'gam es hagoy asher yavodu donanechi," also the nation that worked you, that made you work, I'm also going to judge them. Then you're going to go out with a lot of property. So that's why the Jews went out with kol tuv mimin brachas, all different types of good things from brachas, which is the same lashon that the Medrash opens up with. We're going to see earlier in Parak Mem Beis. All right, kol tuv. Parak Mem Ches. We're holding in the middle of the parak, towards the end of the parak actually. Last week we discussed how the 5 fingers, each finger is merames on a different type of Geulah. The Geulah of Noach and the Geulah of Mitzrayim, Vuchais, v'chulu. Now we're going to discuss another nukuda that has to do with the number 5. First of all, Stam, I just want to remind ourselves, in the introduction here we mentioned a story about Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua when they were little kids. They went into the Beis Medrash on the day that nobody else showed up, and they said, "No, we have to learn." But they're like, "We don't know anything because we're little kids. So what are we going to talk about?" So they said, "Oh, we'll darshan the extra letters in the Aleph Beis, because they only knew Aleph Beis. So there's 5 letters in the Aleph Beis that are doubled, right? Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Peh, Chaf. There's a regular Mem and an end Mem, or a Mem Sofit. A regular Nun and an end of Nun, a regular Tzadik and an end of Tzadik. So they darshan it over there. So here also, Pirkei Double is going to darshan the letters that are repeated in the Aleph Beis. It's interesting that Rabbi Eliyahu Izmir in V'lo Oid Ella, a Pirush on Pirkei Double, he writes how these 5 things that we're going to discuss now are connected the 5 things that we discussed last week, of the 5 fingers of the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Each one he has a whole explanation how it fits in, but I don't want to get into it. Let's stop and just read it. Stop. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Chamesh oisiyos shenichvalu b'Torah ba'oisiyos kulam b'sed Geulah." The 5 letters which are repeated in the Torah, in the letters, ba'oisiyos, in the letters, kulam b'sed Geulah. In those letters is the secret to the Geulah. So we said there's 5: Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Peh, and Chaf. Right? That Chazal tells Menatzpach. The Gemara in Mesachas Megillah talks about these letters. Here we're going to darshan them, the Radal points out, in the order that they first appear in the Aleph Beis. So we're not going to darshan it as Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Peh, Chaf. We're going to darshan it as Chaf, Mem, Nun, Peh, Tzadik. Okay. Chaf, Chaf. What's Chaf, Chaf? Boi nigal Avram Avinu mi'ur Kasdim. With the letters Chaf, Chaf, that's how Avram Avinu had Geulah from Ur Kasdim, and he went to Eretz Yisrael. Shnei, it says in the pasuk, Lech lecha me'artzecha. Go from your land. So there's a double Chaf, so that we see that Avram Avinu's Geulah came with a Chaf. Mem, Boi nigal Yitzchak Avinu mi'ad plishtim. With the letter Mem, or Mem, the letter Mem, that's how Yitzchak Avinu was nigal from the plishtim. He was saved from the plishtim. Shenamar, because it says in the pasuk, after Yitzchak had an unfriendly encounter with the plishtim, they said to him, "Lech mi imanu, go away from us, ki atzamta mimenu ma'id," because he became very strong or very rich or whatever, and they didn't like the fact that he was so matzliach, so they sent away Yitzchak. So his Geulah came with the Mem over there. It's Lech mi imanu, ki atzamta mimenu ma'id. How many mems is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mems in those few words. So you see they came with a mem. Nun, by nigal Yaakov Avinu miad Esav. With the letter Nun, that's how Yaakov Avinu was saved from Esav. Shneimar, because it says in the pasuk, when Yaakov Avinu davened that he should be saved from Esav, so he said to Hashem, Hatzileni no miad ochi miad Esav. Please save me from my brother from Esav. And last week he spoke about what the double lashon of from my brother from Esav is. Okay, but here we see here's a nun hatzilei ni no, two nuns. So you see that the nun was the letter that Yaakov Avinu had his Geulah from Esav. Peh, the double peh. That was how our forefathers were redeemed from Mitzrayim, with the double peh. Shenamar Pakod Pakaditi aschem. Hashem said, Pakod Pakaditi aschem. Parshas, it means, I've surely remembered you. Remembering, I have remembered you. Pakod Pakaditi, peh. Tzadik. That with that letter, with the tzaddik, that's how Hashem is destined to redeem Klal Yisrael at the end of the fourth kingdom. Meaning at the end of when the time for Rome, Golas Edom is up, Hashem is going to redeem us with the tzaddik. Hashem is going to say, I have made grown a growth. Meaning it's talking about the Geulah. The Geulah is going to grow. Shenamar, it says a pasuk in Zechariah, Hine ish, behold, there is a man, Tzemach Shemoy. His name is Tzemach. Umitachtav Yitzmach, and from under him, everything is going to grow out. Things are going to grow because of him. Meaning Mashiach. Ubanaz Heichal Hashem, and he's going to build the sanctuary of Hashem. Some of Farshim said, and the name of Mashiach is going to be Tzemach. That's the name. Okay, so we have. Basically, we said these five letters. Of course, the 5 letters that are doubled in the Aleph Beis correspond to 5 different types of Geulah that happen in Klal Yisrael or are going to happen in Klal Yisrael. Right there. These letters were only given over to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu passed them to Yitzchak. Yitzchak misaran leYaakov. Yitzchak gave it over to Yaakov. Yaakov misaran leYosef. Yosef passed it over to Yosef. Yosef misaran leEchav. Yosef gave it over to his brothers. And his brother, the Asher ben Yaakov, Asher the son of Yaakov, Yosef's brother, Masar Saida Geulah Serach bas Asher. He passed it over to Serach bas Asher. Pashtus Serach bas Asher was a daughter of Asher. But some of you might know that the Targum in Parshas Pinchas says that she wasn't really the daughter of Asher; she was the adopted daughter. And the Sefer Yashar says that Asher married someone who was previously married to someone in Malkiel, and he died, and then Asher married her. But she had from her first marriage Serach, so that's why it says in the pasuk V'shem bas Asher Serach. She wasn't really the daughter of Asher. That was her name. They called her the daughter of Asher, but she wasn't really the. There's some of Farshim say that Sarah Bas Asher wasn't really the daughter of Asher. Okay. But Kopanim, they gave her the Soida Geulah. Ukshaba Moshe ve'Aaron Exile Ziknei Yisrael. When Moshe and Aaron came in front of the elders of Klal Yisrael, v'asu ha'oseis le'eineihem, and they did the different signs in front of the elders of Klal Yisrael, the shtick with the stick turning into the snake, and the shtick with the hand turning into tsaras, and maybe I think they even did the blood. All these signs that Moshe and Aaron did to show right. They did it also for the Ziknei Yisrael, I think. No. The Torah says, yeah.
They showed them the signs. It didn't say explicitly. It said them the signs.
Right, the signs. I talk about these signs, I think. At least someone says it, I think. Oh, so they showed them these signs, and Moshe Rabbeinu was basically saying, time for the Geulah, right? To prepare for the Geulah. So the elders of Klal Yisrael went to their elder, the really old lady, Serach bas Asher, and they said to her, They went to her, they said to her, a man came and he did these certain signs in front of our eyes, he did such and such, and he's claiming that he's bringing the Geulah. So what are we supposed to do? They're asking her Eitzah, Kilu. Amra lahem, so she said to them, there's no mamashais to these signs. There's no reality to them, no actuality to them. I know why you gave me a funny look. Amra, they said to her, did he not say? Did Moshe Rabbeinu not say that Hashem said Pakod Pakaditi aschem? So she said, first of all, the signs that they did, that's nothing. They said, he said Pakod Pakaditi aschem. So Amar lahem, so she said to them, He said, Pakod Pakaditi aschem. Hu ha'ish she'asid ligalis Yisrael mi'Mitzrayim. He is the man that's destined to take to redeem the Jews from Mitzrayim. Shekach shamati me'aba pei upei. This is because that's what I heard from my father. Pei upei. The lashon of the Geulah is going to be with two pays. Pei upei. She'emar Pakod Pakaditi aschem. So Serach Bas Asher said, this is the real deal over here. Miyad heminu ha'am belikim of Moshe. Immediately the nation believed in Hashem and in Moshe Rabbeinu. Shneimar, because it says in the pasuk, Vaya'amen ha'am, the nation believed. Vayishma'u, and they heard, Ki pokad Hashem es b'nei Yisrael, that Hashem has redeemed or remembered Klal Yisrael. Okay, so there's a few interesting points to speak about over here about this whole thing with the different the signs, and they went to Serach Bas Asher. The first thing is like this. The Gemara in Maseches Soita and Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph says that when Moshe Rabbeinu when they were on their way out of Mitzrayim, so Moshe Rabbeinu was going to go and get the Aron of Yosef to take out with him. He went to go take the coffin of Yosef with him out of Mitzrayim, but he didn't know where it was. So Gemara says he went to Serach Bas Asher to ask her, where is it? The Taisus over there, Maseches Soita asks the question. Taisus says, why did Moshe Rabbeinu dafka go to Serach Bas Asher? Why didn't he go to Machir or Yair ben Menashe, who were also, from that early generation? They were still alive. Chazal tell us that Yair and Machir, they were from the people that came into Eretz Yisrael, because they were older than 60 at the time of the Chidei Egel, and so they went into Eretz Yisrael. They weren't killed in the Midbar. And even the Chazal tell us that in the time of Yeshua, Yair was still alive, and when it says in the Sefer Yeshua, it says by the battle of Ai, so it says that the people from Ai killed 36 Jewish soldiers. So Chazal tells us it doesn't really mean 36. It really means Yair ben Menashe, who is equal to 36, which is Rav of the Sanhedrin, because he was so chashav, he was equal to Rav of the Sanhedrin. Right? So we know Machir and Yair were chashav people, and they were still alive at that point, and they lived even longer then. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu go to Serach Bas Asher to ask her where was Yosef buried? He could have asked Yair and Machir. That Taisus is kasha. The Taisus answers because the Soida Geulah was given over to Serach Bas Asher. So apparently the way I understand it, just like we're saying over here in the Medrash, that she was the one who knew that the Geulah is supposed to be with pei, so too she was also the one who they gave over to her the knowledge of where Yosef is going to be buried, so that when the time comes, she'll tell Moshe Rabbeinu where it is. The Taisus Shantz in Maseches Soita says a different teretz to this question. Taisus Shantz in Maseches Soita says, it's not that Moshe Rabbeinu dafka went to ask Serach Bas Asher. It's just that he was going to go try to find where Yosef was buried, and it happened to be that the first person that he met was Serach Bas Asher, so he asked her. But Taisus Shantz is saying that if he would have met Yair ben Menashe, let's say, then he would have asked him. It just happened to be that he asked Serach Bas Asher, not Yair ben Menashe. That's what Taisus Shantz over there says. Interestingly, there's a Sefer Binyan Ariel from Rav Shol of Amsterdam, who's a grandson of the Rebbe Reb Heschel, in Binyan Ariel in the Parshas Shuselach. So he says, he sort of asks this question, and then he doesn't really say such a stark answer, but he just says that, when Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to get the coffin of Yosef, so everyone else was busy getting Bizas Mitzrayim, getting their vessels and all kinds of gold and silver from the Egyptians. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to ask somebody else where Yosef is buried, because everyone else is busy getting their treasures, so he didn't want to stop them from getting their treasures. So instead he asked Serach Bas Asher. He doesn't really explain, but maybe Serach Bas Asher was busy getting her treasures. So for some reason he's assuming that she wasn't. But it's interesting to note like this. The Radal asks a question like this. Says, okay, fine. Like Taisus' answer was, so they gave the Soida Geulah dafka to Serach Bas Asher, so that's why Moshe Rabbeinu went to ask Serach Bas Asher where she was buried and etc. But the Radal asks over here, but why did they give the Soida Geulah dafka to Serach Bas Asher? There were other people from that generation also alive, so why dafka her? So the Radal says two answers. He says, first of all, because Serach Bas Asher, they knew that Serach Bas Asher was going to have a special Arichas Yomim, because Yaakov Avinu gave her a bracha when she was the one that revealed that Yosef is still alive, so he gave her a bracha that she's going to live a long life. And Chazal even tell us that she ended up going into Gan Eden alive. She never actually died. That's a Mesechus Derech Eretz Zuta. So that's why they dafka her, because they knew that she'll still be alive whenever the Geulah is supposed to happen. The other answer, the Radal says, I don't know how much it really answers the question, but the Radal says that they didn't want to give the Soida Geulah to Bnei Ephraim, or because the Bnei Ephraim were the ones that left early, and we see that they're not they're not trusted with knowing this type of knowledge. So we didn't want to give it to them, and then also to Bnei Menashe they didn't want to give it because all Bnei Yosef is like one category. But he doesn't really explain why they didn't give it to anyone else. He just says, why not Bnei Ephraim and Bnei Menashe? But he doesn't explain, okay, maybe there was nobody else alive at that time. I don't know, because Tesis' question was from Machir and Yoyer, but maybe there was no one else from that generation. Well,
Yeshua, what tribe was he from?
Yeshua is from Ephraim.
So then he's out, then, according to that answer.
Yeah.
But he could have.
Right, in theory. He was already alive at this point, right? How old was Yeshua? You could figure out how old Yeshua was.
Passed away when he was 110.
He passed away when he was 110, and he was
40 years of desert.
14 years he was a ruler. So 110 minus 14 minus 40 in the desert, whatever that is.
How many years did it take him to conquer it?
14 years. There's 7 years to conquer and 7 years to be like it.
Divide, conquer and divide.
Conquer and divide, yeah.
14 plus 40. What do you have? 54?
54. So 100 minus 54 is
46.
46. So Yeshua was about
from 110.
For 110, yeah.
No.
Oh, 100.
You said 100.
110.
But now
So it's 56.
It says Meir Vesem Shad.
56.
Meir Vesem Shad. It says in the pasuk.
Right.
56 years old.
Took away 10 years.
Like Yosef was also 110 years
I
old.
think Hashem took it away because he purposely took a longer time.
Right, that's what they say.
I forgot which Mephosheth says it, you know?
It's fun in Midrashim, I think. Okay, so that's one Nakuda. Another Nakuda is like this. We're talking about that there was a certain Messiah that says that Hashem is going to redeem Klal Yisrael with a double lashon of Peh, Pakod Pakaditi. Yeah. So the question is like this: once Serach Bas Asher realized that Moshe Rabbeinu said this lashon of Pakod Pakaditi, so then she said, "Oh, he's the guy that's going to bring the Geulah," and then everyone believed him. So the question is like this: we know that there was some sort of Messiah floating around that Hashem is going to redeem Klal Yisrael with these words, Pakod Pakaditi. So how could they trust Moshe Rabbeinu that maybe he heard about such a Messiah, so he used those words because those are the magic words? How do we know that he's really coming to bring the Geulah? This is the Ramban's kasha. This is the Ramban and Parshas Shmois's kasha. So I think that like if we speaking back about what we said from Taisus in Saita and Taisus Shans in Sechel Saita. So Taisus asked, why did Moshe Rabbeinu ask Dafka Serach Bas Asher and not anyone else? Right? So we have two answers. One answer was because the Soida Geulah was given to Serach Bas Asher. That's what Taisus says. Taisus Shans says because that was the first person that he met. Right? So according to Taisus, it seems that nobody else had this Soida Geulah. It was only given to Serach Bas Asher. She was the only one who knew about it. According to Taisus Shans, other people knew about it. It just happens to be that she was the first one that he bumped into. So I think that the Ramban's kasha only starts if you learn like Taisus Shans, that other people had this Messiah. If you learn like Taisus, so only Serach Bas Asher had it. So what's the question? Maybe he just heard that these words were supposed to be the magic words. Nobody knew about it. That's what I think. But the Ramban asks this question in Parshas Shmois, and the Ramban says two answers. His first answer also leaves a little bit to you have to think about what he means. But the first answer says that part of the Messiah that the Geulah is going to come with Pakod Pakaditi is that the first person who says Pakod Pakaditi, he's the real Goyel. He's going to bring the real Geulah, and Hashem is not going to be testing you with fake people saying Pakod Pakaditi, and that's part of it. It sounds a little bit circular. Like How do you know it wasn't fake? Because part of the Messiah was that the first one that says it is not going to be fake. You knew that, wouldn't I say it then? That's more of a reason to fake it. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Not really. Say it again.
Ban's answer is that, no, you can't say that he was faking it. Because part of the Messiah of Pakod Pakaditi is that the first person that says Pakod Pakaditi, he is the real Geulah.
Whoever it is.
Yeah, whoever it is. And Hashem is not going to bring a fake person to come say it.
Why was he scared to give it to the frog? That's what you're saying?
No, so the question is that if that was part of the Messiah, that the first person that says it, and Hashem is not going to, so then if you hear such a Messiah, you heard, oh, this is the first person that says these words, he's going to bring the Geulah, right? So then you would say those words.
Who, Moshe Rabbeinu?
Yeah. So how do you know that was really bringing the Geulah? The fact that he said those words. Hagufa. He heard that if you say those words, then people are going to think you're bringing the Geulah. But maybe he's lying. So what made them believe that? So the man's question comes back.
It seems like that itself is an answer to the question. If the first person who says
One
is
cookie.
the Geulah, then means that nobody else is going to be able to do that. Even if somebody else is going to want to copy, he's not going to be able to do it with oil. Because
not going to be able to do it? Because you can't say the words?
It seems like the first person who says it, that's going to be him. So anybody else that tries to do it, automatically he's not going to be able to say it.
So how come nobody said it like 50 years ago?
Because they weren't able to.
Brian,
He didn't say these
he didn't say these words.
He didn't, but he did,
well,
and that's why
maybe they didn't know that.
Those that said, oh, here's the Geulah, and they went with him.
Maybe they didn't know that.
Maybe they didn't, that's why they went.
Right.
Not everybody thought themselves.
So the second teretz, the second teretz the Ramban says is very gishmak teretz. If you think about the story of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a shtickle tragic story. You know, he grew up by his parents' house when he was a little kid, and then he ended up having to go to the house of Paro, and then he ran away, and then he ended up coming back as an old man, and he took Klal Yisrael out and led him in the desert for 40 years. But like he never like really had shaychus with his family. He was away from his parents. Why did Hashem have to make it that he had to grow up in the house of Paro instead of growing up in his own house? So Ban says, based on a medrash, that this is the reason why. If he would have grown up in his parents' house, so then people would assume, oh, he said Pakod Pakaditi. You know why? Because he's a Talmud Chacham. He learned Bricks. He knows that if you say Pakod Pakaditi, and then people are going to know that's the simon for the Geulah. So they're not going to believe it. So Hashem made it that he didn't grow up in his own house, in his parents' house. He grew up in the house of Paro, where you wouldn't expect that a kid who grew up in the house of Paro would know about this Messiah, Pakod Pakaditi. So so Hashem made it that now that he came and said Pakod Pakaditi, now people are going to believe him. They're not going to say, oh, he just told me you heard about this Messiah, so he's repeating these words. No, this is the real deal. No?
He knew he was Jewish, meaning he went out. He killed an Egyptian who hit his ach, right? He knew he was Jewish. He grew up a little bit in the Jewish.
Yeah, he knew he was Jewish. Maybe he ate bagels on Sunday or whatever. But he knew all these different things. Like this is the sign of the Geulah. And I ask a random guy in the street. Ask him like, okay, what are the signs for the Geulah? Mashiach is supposed to come. What are the signs for the Geulah? He doesn't know. He doesn't know the Gemaras that talk about when Mashiach is supposed to come and all the different simanim that what Motzei Shvius is Kolos or whatever the Gemara speaks about different things, right? Sanhedrin over there, right? Even I don't remember exactly by heart. So you even if he knew it has some sort of Jewish identity, he wouldn't know all the details about Pakod, like his exact words, Pakod Pakaditi. Right, so that's the Ramban's second answer. There's a third answer, a very gishmak answer over here. It's brought on, it's the Sefer Bayis HaGadol that you have over here on the bottom. So he says this, and also I found that another Sefer, Tchilas Mordechai, from Mordechai Gimpel Yafa, has a pirush called Tchilas Mordechai on the Ramban. So he's mechaven basically to the same idea. That we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was Pakod Peh. He had a had a difficult time pronouncing things. Literally, Pakod Peh means his mouth was heavy. It was heavy. It was hard for him to speak properly. Right?
It's because of the cold. Because of the cold.
Okay, there's a medrash that says because it was the cold.
Any other Midoshim speak about this?
I'm not sure.
But you give a technical reason, not a spiritual, a technical reason.
I know, but the way I want to understand it, they don't speak out this point, but I think that maybe this is what they mean. The lashon kvad peh, you could take it literally to mean kvad peh. The peh was heavy. It was hard for them to pronounce the letter peh. There's Beis Vav Mem Peh are 4 letters that are pronounced with the lips. B, V, W, M, and P are pronounced with the lips. So Kavad Peh means that it was hard for Moshe Rabbeinu to pronounce the Peh. And so Moshe Rabbeinu al Pider Chateva would not have been able to say the words Pakod Pakaditi because there's 2 Pehs over here. And somehow al Derech HaNeis, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to say these words perfectly, as if he didn't have any speech impediment. That was really the sign. The sign wasn't Stam saying the words Pakod Pakaditi. The sign was that he said the words Pakod Pakaditi in a miraculous fashion. That's what the Bayis HaGadol and the Tchilas Mordechai want to say. Very interesting. There's one more nakud over here about the peh. The Pirush Rekeach al Torah in Parshas Vayechi says another nakud about peh. That when Yosef originally said over this Soida Geulah is going to come with peh, so Yosef, the way the Rekeach brings it down, says that Yosef said that I was king for 80 years, like we said earlier in Parak Yud Aleph. We said that Yosef was the viceroy for 40 years, and then he was king himself for 40 years. So Yosef Sachakol was king for 80 years altogether. So Yosef says, I was king for 80 years, peh is 80. So too, the person who's going to bring the Geulah is going to be 80 years old. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was 80 years old when the Geulah happened, when he went to Paro. And Moshe ben Shvayim Shana. So peh is another nukuda. Peh has to do with the years of Moshe Rabbeinu are going to sort of mimic the years of Yosef. It's another point that the Rekeach in Parshas Vayechi says. I seem to remember that he brings it in the name of Pirkei Eliezer. This nukuda, even though it doesn't say it in our Pirkei Eliezer, but I think he says it in the name of Pirkei Eliezer. Fine, moving along. Just one more nakud over here. Right. We said that the Moshe Rabbeinu did, and Moshe and Aaron did these signs for the Ziknei Yisrael, and then they went to Serach Bas Asher and they said he did these signs. So what does that mean? So she said it doesn't mean anything. And then they said, but he said Pakod Pakaditi. And then she said, he said Pakod Pakaditi? Okay, so this is the real deal. So what were they, if they didn't know that Pakod Pakaditi is a siman for the Geulah, so then what were they saying? He said Pakod Pakaditi. Why would you think that there's any significance to the fact they said Pakod Pakaditi? All you know is he did these signs, and she said the signs are nothing. Fine, so why are you mentioning that he said Pakod Pakaditi? You don't know, if they didn't know that that's the sign of the Geulah until Serach Pasach says, yeah, that's the sign, so why are they mentioning it? So the Zayis Ranan in the Yalkut Shemayin in Parshas Lech Lecha, he says that they were thinking, Yosef said this lashon of Pakod Yifkod Elikim Eschem. So they were thinking, well, Yosef said such a lashon, and this guy says such a lashon, so maybe there's something to it. So they spoke it out to Serach Bas Asher, and it happens to be that they were right. There is something to it, and that's a special siman for the Geulah. That's what the Zayis Ranan over there, Parshas Lech Lecha says. The Radal over here says that it's a doichek. He says just because he uses the same phrase, a similar phrase to the phrase that Yosef used, so they thought that they should say it over to speak it out to Serach Bas Asher. He said Pakod Pakaditi. The Radal doesn't like it. The Radal favors another approach, that the words Pakod Pakaditi have a different meaning. The way the Radal understands the Shaklavatari over here between the Ziknei Yisrael and Serach Bas Asher, so they came and they said to Serach Bas Asher, look, this guy came and he did all these signs for us. Maybe it's time for the Geulah. And Serach Bas Asher said, no, it's not the time for the Geulah. You know why? Because it's not 400 years yet. It hasn't passed 400 years. It's only 210 years. because this Geulah is supposed to be for 400 years. So that's what she was telling them back. And then they said back, no, but he said Pakod Pakaditi. Pakod Pakaditi means, the word Pakod means remember, like Ufaktenu Voilev Rachel, Hashem should remember us, right? Hashem Pakad Sarah, Hashem remembered Sarah, right? But also Lashon Pakod, or like Lashon like Pikadon, or Elef Fikudei Amishkan, it's also an expression of Cheshbon, to make a Cheshbon. Pikudei is a Cheshbon, Pikudim, Chumash right? Sefer Bamidbar is the book of Numbers. It's called Chumash HaPikudim. It's the book of Numbers. That Pikudim is the Cheshbon. So basically, when they said Pakod Pakaditi, when Moshe Ben said Pakod Pakaditi, he was saying, I know it's not 400 years, but there's a Cheshbon. Hashem is making a Cheshbon why you should go out of the Geulah, even though the way you see it, it's not 400 years. And that's what they were telling Serach Bas Asher. They're saying, yeah, it's not 400 years, but he said that there's a special cheshbon that we didn't understand. And then Serach, what? He said these words, Pakod Pakaditi? Okay, fine. So that's already the siman of the Geulah itself. Rabbi Leomi Izmir says, more al derech pshat, that when Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, Pakod Pakaditi, he said, listen, I have a siman for you, Pakod Pakaditi. And they didn't understand the significance of that. But they went to Serach Bas Asher and they told her the different things that he did, and she said, that's nothing. And then they're thinking, wait, also he said that he has a siman, these words, Pakod Pakaditi. They didn't understand the significance of it, but he said he had a siman. And then she's like, that's he said this siman of Pakod Pakaditi, that's really the siman. And they went with it. Fine. So we said that she said, Serach Bas Asher said, he said Pakod Pakaditi, pay. That's what I was makabala. That's the siman for the Geulah, and this guy is the one who's really going to lead Klal Yisrael out. And said, Miyad heminu ha'am belikim of Moshe. Immediately the nation believed in Hashem and in Moshe, and we brought a pasuk vayamin ha'am that they believed in Moshe and about the Geulah, etc. Now I just want to share with you an interesting ha'ara that I had. The Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei Torah, Perek Ches, Halacha Aleph. The Rambam says a very interesting thing, which it seems is contradicted both by this pasuk and the Pirkei D'Blezer over here, and Mufurish pasuk and Parshas Beshalach. Let's read the Rambam. The Rambam says, Moshe Rabbeinu lo yaminu by Yisrael mepnei ha'osos she'asa. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jews didn't believe in him because of the signs that he did. Because a person who's the basis of his belief is because of a sign, a miracle, in his heart there's a doifi, there's an inequity in his heart, because it's possible that maybe those signs, those miracles were done through magic or through sleight of hand, and then they weren't real. And if that's the whole basis of belief, then if I could prove to you that there wasn't real, or it was done through magic or whatever, then there goes your whole belief system. So they didn't believe in Moshe Rabbeinu because he did these miracles. Rather, all the miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu did in the midbar was for a certain purpose. And then he goes and explains why each miracle had a purpose. And then he says, because of what did they believe in Moshe Rabbeinu? It says, "B'ma'amad har Sinai she'einenu ra'u v'loi zar v'aznenu shamo v'loi achar." At the revelation at Mount Sinai, where our eyes saw it, not a foreign person, our ears heard it, and not somebody else. All these things, the ha'esh and the koles, the lapidim, the fires and the voices and the Moshe Rabbeinu going all into the darkness, and Hashem speaking. All these things, that's what Hashem believes, that's why we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. And he brings a pasuk, Hine Enechi bo elecha ba'ava ha'anan ba'avur yishma ha'am b'dabri imach v'gam b'cha yaminu la'olam. Michlal, so this is what Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu by Matan Torah, and it says that when you come, gam b'cha yaminu la'olam, they're going to believe in you forever. Michlal, Rambam says, this implies, shukoidem davar zeh, before Ma'amad Har Sinai, loy haminu boine monus shehi oimedes loilam. They didn't believe in Moshe Rabbeinu of an everlasting belief. Alane monus Rather, they believed in him a belief that you can have second thoughts about it and think twice about it. So it sounds like from the Rambam that they didn't really believe in Moshe Rabbeinu until Har Sinai. Over here we're saying once Serach Bas Asher said that pay, that's the sign for the Geulah, Vayamein Ha'am, and they believed in Moshe Rabbeinu and they believed in Hashem and everything. And we say by Az Yasher, it says when Hashem split the sea and the Jews crossed and the Egyptians were drowned, it says Vayamein Hashem v'Moshe Avdai. They believed in Hashem and in Moshe his servant. So it sounds like they believed Shalom. The Rambam is explaining that when we're saying that they believed in Moshe Rabbeinu in these two instances, in the beginning of its time and over there by Kriyas Yamsuf, it wasn't such a full belief. Only by Matan Torah did the full belief come about. So I think it's an important thing to point out. But let's go weiter. Rabbi Kiva says, the taskmasters of Paro would beat the Jews in order to make made bricks, like pre-made bricks. Shenamar, as it says in the Pasuk, they had a quota of how many bricks they were supposed to make, and the taskmasters would beat them up if they didn't keep to that quota. The Egyptians did not give straw to the Jews to make these bricks. Shenamar, straw has not been given to your servants, and you're telling us to make bricks. How can you tell us to make bricks if you didn't give us any straw to make those bricks? So what did they do? How did they make the bricks without getting straw? They had to make the straw. They had to make the chomer. They had to make They had to make the form of the bricks on their own without getting straw. They would go and they would get straw themselves. They would go and they would gather the straw from the desert, meaning they couldn't get it from people because people weren't giving it to them. So they had to go to a place where it was like no man's land and find straw over there. And then they would take this straw and they would trample on the straw in order to make it compact, and then with that they would make the bricks out of. So it says they would trample on it with their donkeys, with their wives, with their sons, and with their daughters. The Radal sort of changes the girsa. He takes out the word donkeys and says but it should say they would like splash on top of it b'chomer in the ingredients. Haim them u'neshem of nem v'neiseh. It's not b'chamirei b'chomer haim. Okay, it's supposed to be two words. That's what Radal says. So they would like stamp on it or whatever to make it more compact, and with that they would be able to turn it into bricks. V'akash shela midbar hayaneke v'kvem. But the straw from the desert would make holes in their heels. Right? We're talking about the Sahara Desert or whatever, where it's pretty arid and dry and there isn't really much growing, and yet they're going and harvesting all the different shrubbery that's growing over there. And included in the shrubbery that grows over there in the desert, there's a lot of thorns. So if you're going and stomping on these things and there's thorns over there, so it's going to make holes in your heels because you're stomping on like stepping on needles. You're making holes. That's what Radal says. And then the blood from their heels would ooze out and would get mixed into the ingredients that they would use to make the bricks. Fine. Interesting. It gets a little bit more graphic over here. Please excuse me. Rachel bas bitay shel Shuselach. Rachel, the daughter of somebody named Shuselach, haysahara laledis. She was pregnant to give birth. V'ramsa b'chaymer im baila, and she was stamping on this straw with her husband in order to make bricks. V'yotza havalad miteich me'eha, and the child came out of her womb. V'nisarev b'seich hamalbein, and it got mixed up into the things that they were using to make the bricks. and her cries went out in front of the kisei hakavod. That, I guess what happened was she had some sort of miscarriage and her baby came out because of the hard work, and the baby got mixed into the bricks when they were making the bricks, and it was very painful for her, and she was mamish crying. Targum Yonason in Parshas Mishpatim says the kid got mixed into the what's it called, the cement. But here it says into the ingredients of the bricks. Yorad Michael Hamalach, Michael the angel, or in Targum Yonason over there it says Gavriel the angel came, V'lokach es Hamal ben Betit, and he took the bricks with their cement, Betit shalai, with the cement that was with it, and he brought it up in front of the kisei hakavod all the way to Hashem, as if to say to Hashem, look at what the suffering that these Jews have to go through. This poor lady who was working so hard, she had a miscarriage, the kid went inside and got mixed up into the ingredients to making these bricks, and it's mamish so painful. So I guess the way the Medrash is saying it, so Hashem sort of took the pleas of this lady of Rachel Bas Bita Shel Shuselach and decided, this is when the Geulah is going to happen. On that night, Hashem revealed himself and he smote all the firstborns of Mitzrayim. It was in the middle of the night, and Hashem went and smote all the firstborns. The Radal points out that the Chazal tell us that it was already a few months before the Geulah, they're already not working. So he says that when it says that on that night, it doesn't literally mean that night that this story happened, that's when Makas B'charis happened, because there was a whole tahalich, there was a whole process that was happening from like even a year before the Geulah. There was a whole process that started with Makas and everything. Rather, he says that maybe it means that like the year before the Geulah, so this story happened, and then Hashem decided, okay, next year, that's when the Jews are going to go out. Exactly a year from when this story happened. It doesn't mean Balal Azeh, mean literally that night, but like, let's say that night on the calendar in the next year. And the Zayis Ranan also says such pshat in the Yalkut Shemaini. So there's an interesting point over here. I just want to speak out. What was her name? The name of this lady? Her name is Rachel Bas Bitoy Shel Shuselach. There's a few different girsoyos over here what the name was, but our girsa says the daughter of Shuselach. Rachel, the daughter of Shuselach. Who's Shuselach? So I don't remember if we read it, but when we were talking about the psukim in Divrei Yamim about the Bnei Ephraim that left Mitzrayim early, so one of the names over there was Shuselach from the Bnei Ephraim. So the Radal says it could be that Shuselach over here is from that Shuselach that left Mitzrayim early, from the Bnei Ephraim that left Mitzrayim early. That Rachel, this lady Rachel, was a granddaughter of that Shuselach. In the Yalkut Shemaini, in the end of Parshas Shmais, when it brings this medrash, so it had there's a few girsais. Here it says Shuselach. Over there it says either Mishuselach or Methuselah. Now Mishuselach is a name that doesn't appear anywhere, but and Pashas, if you do a computer search, you'll see that in most places that the name Mishuselach comes up is just Pashas a typo of people mistyping Methuselah. But it's an old typo. You find it in old sources also. Someone wanted to say that maybe there was some sort of Kabbalah that he had a different name or two names, or they didn't want to write Misu Shalach because Misu is like Mesu, like they died, so they wrote Mishu Shalach and they switched transposed the letters on Pashtus. It's just a copyist's error, Pashtus. But there is a gersa that says Misu Shalach. The name of the guy was Misu Shalach. That's the gersa of the Yalkut Shemaini in Parshas Shmais. So the Zayis Ranan on the Yalkut Shemaini says, wait, Methuselah? Methuselah is from Parshas Noach. He was like Noach's great-grandfather. Great-grandfather, right? His granddaughter? It doesn't make any sense. So the Zayis Ranan says two nukudas. This is very funny. First it says, Elonai, you have to say that this Shuselach that we're talking about over here, it was a different person with the same name. Different guy, same name. Shuselach, even though it's the same name, but it's not talking about that. And he says, because by the Mabul, nobody survived the Mabul except for Serach and his family. So how can you have this lady over here? So he said that who was the granddaughter of Shuselach. She's not. We don't find that she's from Exile. So he says that it must be a different Shuselach. Then he says another answer. He says, no, could be that Shuselach's, what was this cheshbon? He said, I didn't write it down. What was it? He wrote that could be that Shuselach's daughter married one of the sons of Noach, and then survived, because we know that Noach's family survived, and this is from Noach's family. And then she had a daughter named Rachel, in which case, and this lady Rachel had a Arichas Yamim and lived for like 2,000 years, or something like that. And he says that could be what we're talking about. It's a very funny shtickle in the Zayis Ranan. Interestingly, it's actually been censored, this piece of Zayis Ranan. If you look in the newer prints of Yalkut Shimoni with the Zayis Ranan, it doesn't say it. They take out this whole shtickle. But I looked in the first print of the Zayis Ranan, it says it, and a few later prints also say it. But the newest prints that came out now, it doesn't say it. So interesting. What time is it? I have a watch somewhere.
20.
Okay. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Imani Moitzias Yisrael Balayla, if I take the Jews out of Mitzrayim at night, Yomer Mitzrayim, the Egyptians are going to say, Achshav derech ganovim osa ma'asav. Oh, Hashem does like the deeds of robbers. Right? We know the difference between a ganav and a gazlan. I learned this, I think in 5th grade, was ganov and gazlan. Yeah, ganov is gan night. He does it in the night. He comes in the night and he steals. It's a secret guy. Gazlan is gazlight, because he goes out in the open. The gazlan will come up to you and steal it right out of your stuff. But the ganav does it in the secret of the night. He tries to hide himself. That's the ganav, gan night, gazlan, gazlight. So they're saying, so Hashem said, if I take the Jews out of Mitzrayim at night, so they're going to say I'm like a ganav. I go in the middle of the night and we sneak out and we're sneaky. So I'm not going to take the Jews out in the middle of the night. I'm going to take them out in the middle of the day, when the sun is at the height of its power. As it says in the pasuk, it was in the middle of the day, in the Etzem Hayom Hazeh, Hashem took out the Jews from Eretz Mitzrayim according to their legions. There's another Nukudah. Okay, whatever. The Radal points out like this. The Radal says that the Egyptians used to worship the sun and the moon. So it says Hashem Dafka had them go out Dafka in the middle of the day to show them that this is when the sun has its greatest powers. And look, the sun is hopeless. It can't. The Ra is the sun god. The sun can't help you. The Jews are getting out, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the night they worshiped the moon. They were getting out when? What night of the year were they getting out? What day of the year? What day of the month were they getting out? Tesvav. Tesvav was in the moon. Is a full circle. The height of its power. Still, they're getting out. There's no your astrological influences have no bearing when it comes to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he says, interesting. That's why it says in the pasuk in Tilim Kuf Lamed Vav. It says in the pasuk. What Chazal call Halal Gadol. It says in the pasuk Halal Gadol. It says it's talking about the great things that Hashem created. Hashem made the Shemayim. Hashem made the earth. To make the great luminaries. To make the sun, the rules in the day. The moon and the stars that rule at night. What's the next thing it talks about? To smite the Egyptians according to their firstborns. Hashem took the Jews out with a powerful hand and an outstretched arm. You see there's a connection between Hashem having dominance over the celestial bodies, the sun and the moon and the stars, and a connection between that and Yetzias Mitzrayim. That Hashem Dafka took out the Jews in the middle of the day. Interestingly, when we talk about the middle of the day, so Chatzos Hayom is not, it doesn't usually come up so much. The middle of the day. There's really, if you think about it, there's brought down in earlier Sfarim that there's 4 logical times of the day that you would say, when does the day start? How do you figure out when does the day start? We, according to Chazal, Bnei Yisrael starts the day in the beginning of the night, right? We look at it like this: either when the sun goes down, or when the sun comes up, or midway between the sun going down and the sun coming up, or midway between the sun coming up and the sun going down. Right? Those are the 4 logical times when you should start the day. So we, Bnei Yisrael, we start the day when the sun goes down. Vahi erev vahi boker, right? That's when we start the day, when the sun goes down. The Goyim, most of the Goyim start, at least in the time of Chazal, they start the day when the sun comes up, in the beginning of the day. And we also, in regard to Korbanos and certain other things, we also go from the beginning of the day. Right? As a keves tasa b'boker, as a keves hashin tasa ben arbayim. First of the day, then the afternoon and night. The Goyim, in contemporary times, they start the day in the middle of the night. Meaning halfway between when the sun goes down and the sun goes up. The Mitzrayim, says the Orchis Chaim from Rav Aaron HaKohen Milunil, the Orchis Chaim says that the Mitzrayim started the day in middle of the day. 12 o'clock, that's when the day starts. That's the new day on the calendar. That's how the Egyptian calendar worked, according to Orchis Chaim. So we see that the Egyptians had some sort of they had some sort of chashivas to the middle of the day. We don't find that by anywhere else, really. They had some chashivas to the middle of the day. We also, when we're talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim, so we're saying that they went out mamish in the middle of the day. We also find that the Gemara in Mesachas Pesachim Daf Hey darshans the pasuk of Ach bayem arishan tashbisu so'or mibatechem. When it's talking about the mitzvah of getting rid of your chametz, Ach bayem arishan tashbisu so'or mibatechem. So the Gemara says Ach comes to split it and tell you that part of the day there is a mitzvah of tashbisu, and part of the day there isn't a mitzvah of tashbisu, and really the mitzvah of getting rid of your chametz midaraisa starts, or that you're not allowed to have chametz anymore, starts midaraisa on Erev Pesach at Chatzos Hayom. That's what the Gemara says. In the middle of Erev Pesach, Ach tells you to split it, and in the middle of the day, in the exact midday of Erev Pesach, that's when the mitzvah of tashbisu starts. Says the Meiri in Pesachim Daf Hey. Here he says, why did Hashem do this? We don't find any other mitzvah that starts in the middle of the day. We also find that the Korban Pesach is supposed to be brought dafka after the middle of the day. We also find that the Korban Tamid has to be brought in the end of the day. But I don't know if that takes away from what we're saying, because there's also Korban Tamid in the beginning of the day. So there's like the beginning and the end of the day. But here there's something dafka in the middle of the day. What's in the middle of the day? Dafka Tashbisu, Dafka Korban Pesach, Dafka the Jews went out of Mitzrayim in the middle of the day. The Meiri says that's why the Torah says that the mitzvah of Tashbis was Dafka in the middle of the day, because that's when the Jews went out in the middle of the day, and that's when the Mitzrayim started counting. Not that's when the Jews went out. So because that's when the Mitzrayim started counting their day. I was zeicha to hear from my Rebbe Rav Asher Arieli Shlita when he gave Shir in Mesachas Pesachim. So he took this Meiri a step further. We say in the Pesach Haggadah, it's talking about the introduction to the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it talks about the Chiyuv of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It says, you would have thought that the mitzvah of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim starts on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Right? But Nisan Nigulu. The Geulah has to do with Nisan. The Nisan was when Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Hachayesh is Elachem Reish Chadashim," and this is when you're going to have the Geulah. That's when they first found out about the Geulah. So the Geulah is started in the beginning of Nisan. So you would have thought the Sipur Yitzis time, the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis time, is beginning of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, beginning of Ben Zmanim. That's when you're supposed to sit down with your kids and tell them about Yitzis time. Right? Talmud Leimer, no. Bayahu. It says in the pasuk, no. Bayahu. V'yigav v'lavincha bayahu leimer. Right? Bavuzah also Hashem li b'tisim time. Bayahu, on that day. So then the Haggadah says another thing. If Tafka on that day, yochol meba'odyom. You would have thought from meba'odyom, from not Leil Pesach, but from Erev Pesach, while it was still day. Talmud Leimer bavuzah. Oh, because of this. As for Asher Yeli Shlita. We just said Bayamahu on that day. What was that day? That day was Tesvav. That's when they went out of Mitzrayim, Tesvav Nisan. So how can you say, now that you said Bayamahu, you would have thought from before. Before is not that day. Erev Pesach is not Pesach. Erev Pesach is the day before Pesach. Why would you think that you should start the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis on Erev Pesach? So it says, because we find that when we're talking about Pesach, we sort of work with the Egyptian calendar, like by Tashbisu. We said that Tashbisu starts on Erev Pesach after Chatzos. So you would think Sipur Yitzis also starts on Erev Pesach after Chatzos, because that's when the Mitzrayim started that day. It's still called Bayamahu, because in the Egyptian calendar it's that day. Talmud Leimer Bavur Zeh, because of this. And the Haggadah says, because Bavur Zeh, we said before that Zeh is a lashon of something that you can see, it's tangible, you can point at it. Bavur Zeh, Lo Yamarti, I never said that there's a mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis El B'Shosh Yesh Matzah Munachim L'Fanecha. That's what it says in the Haggadah. Fine. Right there. Oh, stop. We were talking before about that this lady was Rachel Bas Bita Shel Shuselach could be that she was from Shuselach, from the Bnei Ephraim that left early. So the Radal also points out that when Yosef gave the name of Ephraim, so it says, why is it called Ephraim? Ki Yifrani Elikim Be'eretz Oni. Hifrani is a lashon of priya, of giving off fruit. So Yosef was giving Haidah to Hashem. Hashem gave him the ability to give off fruit, to have offspring, while he was Be'eretz Oni, in the land of his affliction. So he wanted to say that this is mamish, the story we're talking about. This lady was having children in the middle of her affliction. It didn't really work out. It looked like it was a miscarriage, and the kid got mixed in with the cement or whatever. It didn't work out. But that's what happened. It was Hifrani Be'eretz Ani. It was having offspring in the land of their affliction. Fine. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kol oisei halayla ha'Yisrael oichlin b'shoisin yayin usmeichem u'ma'alim hakadosh baruch hu b'koil gadol." That whole night, the Jews were eating and drinking wine and being happy and giving praise to Hakadosh Baruch Hu in a loud voice. That night that they were eating the Korban Pesach, it was before the Geulah that they were going to leave the next morning, and that was the night of Makas Bacharis. On the other hand, Hasriim who tzarikin memar nefesh, the Egyptians were screaming out in their bitter souls, al hamagef, in the bitterness of their souls. They were going through a lot of tzaras. Because of that what's it called? The magefa. Because of that, how do you translate magefa?
Plague.
That plague, right? That's the word. The plague that suddenly came upon them. Shema, as it says in the pasuk, there was a great crying in Mitzrayim, because there was no house that didn't have a dead person. What? So the Medrash ends off. In the schus of three things the Jews came out of Mitzrayim. What were those three things? That they didn't change their language. They didn't speak Lashon Hara. They didn't slander about each other. Yichud Hashem, and in making one the name. What does that mean? Making one the name. So the Bayis HaGadol, not the Bayis HaGadol, the Marzu says that Yichud Hashem in parallel midrashim where it brings down the same idea, it says Shalei Shinus Shmam, that they didn't change their names. They used distinctly Jewish names even when they were in Mitzrayim. So it says Yichud Hashem means like they set aside the name. They set aside Jewish names. I didn't have a chance to look at this when I was preparing this year, but I seem to remember that there's a tshuva from Moshe Feinstein where he writes that this inyan of having a distinctly Jewish name was only a mila before Matan Torah. After Matan Torah, there isn't an inyan anymore. But that's what he says means Yichud Hashem. Then he says another pshat. What does it mean Yichud Hashem? It means that they had a emunah on a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yichud Hashem, we said that saying Shema Yisrael is saying that Hashem is one. Yichud Hashem, making Hashem the singular. That's saying Shema Yisrael is called Yichud Hashem. So he says that maybe that's what it means when it says Yichud Hashem. But the Marzul says no, it can't be that that's a pshat, because if that was the pshat, that would have been the first thing mentioned. That's the most chashuv of them. Why is it mentioned last? It sounds like it's the pshat that they didn't change their names. Not that they said Kriya Shema and they believed in Hashem. That's one nukuda. The Radal says Yichud Hashem means that they weren't Ovid of Avodah Zarah. And then he says, we know from Midrashim that they were Ovid of Avodah Zarah. Psukim in Yechezkel, however. So he says he wants to change the gear so slightly. And says not Yichud Hashem, but Yichus Hashem. They gave a yichus to names. They put a special focus on names, like we said before. Yeah, they didn't change the names to use the Egyptian names. We said over here, Shalei hechlifu l'shaynim. One of the milas was that we spoke about before why over here Pirkei Avos doesn't mention that they weren't chashid on a rayas. We spoke about before whether the Radal and whatever whether Pirkei Avos agrees with the fact that they weren't chashid on a rayas. Fine. We said that Shalei hechlifu l'shaynim. They didn't change their language. What does it mean, Shalei hechlifu l'shaynim? So Pasha said means that they kept speaking Lashon HaKodesh, right? But I speak about this barichos in my book on the history of Lashon HaKodesh in the fourth chapter about the Jews in Egypt. There's other midrashim that sound like they did forget Lashon HaKodesh. There's a midrash that says that when a Kodesh Baruch Hu started to speak to Klal Yisrael about the Aseret Dibros, it says Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi comes from the word anuch in Lashon Mitzris, and one of the gersais of this medrash even goes as far as to say that Hashem had to speak to the Jews in Lashon Mitzri because they forgot how to speak Lashon HaKodesh. But we mean lo yachlifu l'shanim. They didn't switch their languages. So on the one hand, it's saying that they didn't speak Lashon HaKodesh. On the other hand, it says they didn't switch the language. So you could say that it's a machlekes between the midrashim, but there's a few other ways to understand this. One way is like this. This is a famous pshat from the Mo'ar Vashomesh, Chassidish Sefer, from what's his name, of Kalman Kleinimus Epstein of Krakow, the Talmud of the Rebbe Melech. So he says in his Pirush on the Haggadah Shel Pesach on Avodim Hayinu, he says that it doesn't mean that they didn't stop speaking Lashon HaKodesh. Avodah they stopped speaking Lashon. They weren't allowed. No one spoke Lashon HaKodesh. They had to. You go to Makar and they don't speak your language. Of course they spoke Egyptian. Avodah they spoke. What it means is that they didn't stop. They didn't switch from the mode of Lashon HaKodesh. Lashon HaKodesh means they didn't switch from being in a situation where they had a holy tongue. They didn't defile their mouth and their tongue by, as what he says, eating macholas asuras, forbidden foods, or speaking things which are forbidden to speak about, whether we're talking about Double Peh, or talking about Lashon Hara, these type of things. They didn't defile their mouth by speaking such things. That's what it means. But of course, the actual language that they spoke was Egyptian. That's what the Marv Hashem writes. The Rav David Baran, you ever heard of him? He was one of the chashuvim from the old yeshuv in Yerushalayim. His father was named Rav Nachum of Shadikar. Rav Nachum Shadikar. There's a street over here in Rehov Haran. It's not named after Rav Nachman in Breslov, and it's not named after Chedushei Haran. It's named after Rav Nachum Shadikar, who was also one of the important figures in the early Yerushalayim. So his son was named Rav David Baran. Baran stands for Ben Harav Nachum. All his sons have the last name of Weisfish. So if you heard of the family, Yerushalmi family of Weisfish, so most of them are descendants of his, if not all of them. But so Rav David Baran, there's a sefer from Rav David Baran called Eirach David. He didn't write it. They compile different things that he said. So he said in Parshas Shmois, I think it was. He said in Parshas Shmois that what it means, it doesn't say that they spoke Lashon HaKodesh. It says that they didn't switch their language. They didn't switch. So he says that they didn't speak Lashon HaKodesh, but they also didn't switch their language. He proposes that what it means is that they spoke a certain dialect of Egyptian, which was like a distinctively Jewish dialect, a certain like a Yiddish Egyptian. I don't know exactly how to be marked there, but that's what it is, like a Yiddish Egyptian. That's what he. That's an old question. Yeah, I know. He adds, if according to the medrash that says that they didn't understand Lashon HaKodesh, so Hashem had to speak to them in Lashon Mitzvahs, but if we're saying the first word was in Lashon Mitzvahs. Anoichi comes from the word anoch, which means love and endearment. But what about the rest of the Aseret Divrus? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
And also perhaps Pakod
Pakaditi
Pakaditi
was also, Pashtus.
that they knew what that meant.
But so I was when I was once discussing this question when I was a bacher in Lakewood in Beis Medrash Geulah, so I was speaking to a friend of mine named Rav Chananya Jacobson. So I asked him this question. On the one hand, it sounds like they forgot Lashon HaKodesh, because Hashem had to speak to them in Lashon Mitzvahs, and this actually answers your question. But on the other hand, we say that Lo Yichlifos L'Shonim. How do you understand these two things? So he wants to say it's like this. He wanted to propose this with Chananya Jacobson. I brought it down in my book. He says that the Jews in Mitzrayim, although they spoke Lashon HaKodesh, of course they also spoke Egyptian, because you can't live in a country without speaking a language. So they know both languages.
Go to Ramat
In Ramat B'Shemesh, even the Israelis know English. But so he says, of course they spoke both. They knew both languages. Rather, what? They were accustomed to accepting orders in Lashon Mitzvahs. They're getting screamed at all day in what language? Egyptian. The Egyptian taskmasters are screaming at them, do this, do this, do this. And they're used to, okay, if someone speaks in this language, so I'm going to listen to what he says. In Lashon HaKodesh, that's what they spoke amongst each other, but that wasn't what they used to accept orders. So when Hashem spoke to them and said, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, he's saying, now I'm your master. You're used to taking orders in Lashon Mitzvahs, so here I'm going to say the first word in Lashon Mitzvahs. So we're going to start off. Now the Egyptians aren't your master anymore. Now I'm your master. Anoichi. And it also fits mamish with the words of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Yisichem Eretz Yisrael. I took you out of Eretz Yisrael. Li'aslechem L'Elikim. I am now you're in charge of you. Not the Egyptians, me. And that's why it started off with Egyptian, even though they spoke Egyptian and they spoke Lashon HaKodesh, and there's no stir between the midrashim. Thank you for coming.